Now, back to Willard and Dibs.
Oh, just determined to get me aggregated, huh?
Yep. Yep.
You know what my Twitter feed will look like if I answer your questions?
On 95.7 The Game.
Haven't had anything to aggregate about the Warriors lately.
No, it's been pretty quiet since
was...
the marketing kind of buzzkill news. The only Warrior stuff has been Draymond cracking on Kerr's Olympic rotation and then the chef becoming him, globally him. We knew, and the NBA knew, but the world now knows he is him.
Him.
He is him.
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy what 4 3-pointers will do for a guy's career. And I was talking to one of our great sales associates, Gabe Shapiro, earlier, and the first thing he asked me when I walked in is Steph Curry now top 5 all time? And I thought about it, like, I don't think so, but the very fact that 2.5 minutes of Olympic basketball can take him from, oh, he's for sure top 10, or, you know, he's on the all-time top 12, or wherever you had him before. 2.5 minutes of Olympic basketball now vaults him into the top 5, possibly of all time. It just reminded me of how unbelievably epic those moments were in the Olympic gold medal game.
Yeah, he was awesome. It was one of the best moments in Steph Curry's career, and having watched the vast majority of Steph Curry's career is one of the best moments that I've watched of him as well. All right, join 95.7 The Game at Harding Park Friday, September 6th for the Pettinelli Financial Partners Golf Tournament benefiting the Autism Society San Francisco Bay Area. Go to 957thegame.com to learn more. Presented by Atco Pest Control, the Bay Area's locally family-owned pest control company. And Dibs, I teased a positive development in the Brandon Aiyuk saga just before we went to break. Before we get to that, just want to remind you what did happen earlier today. According to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, he reported that the Steelers and 49ers have a deal on a potential trade, and Pittsburgh is in a good place on an Aiyuk contract, sources say. If San Francisco gives the final sign-off, it is done. San Francisco has an offer out to Aiyuk on a long-term deal for him to stay, but he hasn't accepted. Okay, so that was the update from earlier today. Now Ian Rappaport's colleague Mike Garafolo on NFL Network reporting that there's some positive momentum between the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk. Listen to Garafolo himself on NFL Network.
This situation has been uncomfortable. It's been contentious. It's still a little bit of both of those as we sit here right now, at least between Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers. I'm going to try to inject a little bit of optimism here because you talked about that Instagram post the other night, Tom, where Aiyuk said that there are 2 options. Let's just pick one, right? I dug into that a little bit, and what I've been told is that Brandon Aiyuk would prefer to stay with the 49ers and has always preferred to stay with the 49ers, all things being equal. Now, they haven't been equal, but they did make that offer. In fact, both sides sent proposals within the last, couple days, week or so. And the 49ers number has gotten better than what it was previously. And they have, from my understanding, they have agreed on a lot of the main points of the deal. Their offers are in line, but it sounds like there's just one more thing that needs to be ironed out. And if that thing gets ironed out, Brandon Aiyuk signs the deal. He stays with the 49ers. He drops the trade request. And finally, we can put this situation behind him, and the Niners can put it behind him. Look, they did the fourth quarter comeback with Deebo Samuel before when he had the trade request. This would be like Montana to John Taylor, that kind of last-second type comeback. But it can happen. It has happened before. Thank you, trying to keep the theme going. Look, as we've talked about leverage. The ball's in whose court. As far as Aiyuk is concerned, it sounds like the ball's in the 49ers court, and he's hoping that they can just make the final adjustment and get this thing done and stay with the Niners. We'll see.
So there's Mike Garafolo of NFL Network trying, as he said, to inject a little bit of optimism into the situation for the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk.
And it sounds like it might be down to just one final detail, I think is what he said in there, and maybe it's the guaranteed at signing number. If the average annual is going to be whatever it's going to be, it ultimately comes down to what's the guaranteed money. I think for all these players, we get fixated in the media and as fans at the average annual value, and very rarely does a player recoup all of that money. It comes down to the guaranteed at signing number, and if that's where the detail lies, then you hope that these two teams would, or these two sides rather, would be able to to iron out that small detail. And if you take Mike Garafolo at his word, and I do, all these reporters, they're out there talking to the people close to the deal. If Brandon Aiyuk wants to be a 49er first and foremost, if that's his priority, then this thing should get done. And the longer this goes on, from the Ian Rappaport report, which was this morning at about 10:15, that the Niners and Steelers do have a deal in place that Aiyuk just has to sign off on. Well, that's now been 6 hours. So during that time, nothing has happened. And the longer that goes, the more it feels like Aiyuk and the Niners have time to hammer out something and have him stay.
Yeah, no doubt. So Mike Garafolo, NFL Network, a couple of things there. First of all, he said very matter-of-factly that Brandon Aiyuk prefers to stay with the 49ers and has always preferred to stay with the 49ers. He did add on there at the end, all things being equal. And then he said, up to this point, things haven't been equal, although they're becoming a little bit more equal, because he also reported that the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk and his camp have kind of put some offers on the table to each other within the last couple of days, maybe the last week total. We had the report late last week that there was some renewed optimism and that the two sides were sitting down with each other. So maybe that was the starting point of this. And he's saying that in Aiyuk's eyes, the Niners' offers have been improving, and he's just waiting, Aiyuk is, for one little box to check. And as soon as that box gets checked, he'll sign it and he'll be a Niner for years to come. It's interesting because I always felt like the way this happened, this was going to happen, Dibs, and certainly this is good news for the 49ers and for 49er fans. It does seem a little more likely now, at least, that a deal will get done, and I've always felt that a deal was going to get done. However, this wasn't the way I thought it was going to get done. I thought ultimately that Brandon Aiyuk would just decide to not go to Pittsburgh because he didn't want to, and he'd be forced to sign what the Niners were sitting with their $26 million offer. But the way Garafolo is reporting this makes it seem as if Aiyuk is kind of forcing the 49ers' hands, and the 49ers are giving in a little bit.
Well, it depends on what the number ends up at and how much guaranteed he gets. But, this whole thing has been done in a little bit of an uncomfortable fashion for at least 49er fans. I don't know if the front office has felt uncomfortable, but it seems like they calculated a certain amount of behavior from Brandon Aiyuk that they didn't get. And whether or not the hold in is what threw them a curveball, and they realized that, Brandon Aiyuk is willing to just show up and get paid and not be a part of the proceedings and just, show up and do that. And maybe that very presence was more annoying to Kyle Shanahan than they thought that it would be. Whatever has happened, I do think that there's been a little bit of a miscalculation by the 49ers. Again, it all depends on where the number ends up being.
Yeah, true.
If they offered him 26 months ago and they wind up paying him 27, well, is that a loss for Parag Marate? I guess, but not really, because New England was willing to pay him more than 32. So there will be ways, if he signs with the 49ers, there will be ways for all sides to spin this their way. And ultimately, the 49ers spin will be, we like the player, we drafted the player, we signed the player. This is what we were going to do all along. Yes, he wanted to be traded, or he requested a trade, and so we did right by Brandon, and we went out there and we got the best deals that we could get, but ultimately, it never culminated because all parties couldn't agree on what was going to work for the other team, our team, and for Brandon. And if Brandon comes in and signs for, even if it's $26 million, he can spin it as, I went from 14.1 to 26 million, and I now have 35 million or 40 million guaranteed at signing. I'm a rich man, and I always wanted to be a 49er. And yeah, I went about things in a certain way because I was frustrated. And, I've never been in this spot before, but ultimately, I never said that I didn't want to be a 49er, and he never said that. He was out there courting other teams, and Jaden Daniels, his buddy.
Yeah, he said the Niners don't want him, but he never said that he didn't want to be a Niner. True.
They said they don't want me. That's what he said, and he said it with such forlorn sadness that
they don't want me.
That's right, and they say they don't want me. And, well, they didn't really say that they don't want you, but
they don't want you at X amount of dollars.
Exactly. So I do think if the deal gets done, all sides can spin it as a win. And ultimately, what fans want is for Brandon Aiyuk to be playing for the Niners.
You're right in that it will, we don't have to like hand out a grade. Oh, Parag Marate gets a C plus for this negotiation. But we won't know really who won the negotiation, who lost the negotiation until, of course, we see all the details of the contract. But say the Niners ultimately end up offering what the Steelers were offering, and we get confirmation of that. My first reaction to that would be, okay, then what was all the drama of the last few months for? Like, you got to this point, and maybe it was just the 49ers betting on themselves 3-4 months ago, all the way back in April and March when they reportedly first offered a deal 5 months ago, that it wouldn't get to this point and that Aiyuk would cave and take less. But that would have been a miscalculation by the 49ers at that point. And then you put yourself through all this drama over the last couple of months, this entire offseason, only to get to a point where you end up offering what Aiyuk wanted all along, potentially. What was the point of these last few months of hand-wringing? And I guess it was hand-wringing for the hope that it would save you a couple $1 million a year, but you might get to a point where it didn't save you anything.
Yeah, it probably did save you some, though, because other than signing him for $26 million way back in March, which would have been the ideal, but they didn't get that done. They didn't do it soon enough, and then other deals came in and the market changed. If you could have done it then, you would have saved yourself all the hand-wringing, all the stress, and you would have gotten him at a number that was lower than where it probably eventually will be if the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk do eventually agree to sign a contract. But what happened after that, you dug in, and he dug in, and I don't know if the Niners thought that he would be as dug in as he was, and it turns out he was more built for this than they thought. And here we are in mid-August. And even when he requested a trade and they went out there and they did the work for him and they got him a trade to New England and they were going to give him a reported $32 million plus, and he said no, I bet you they were caught off guard by that. I can't imagine they thought.
Really?
I don't think that they put that trade in place and then New England came to him with an offer for $32 million a year reportedly, and he says no. I would imagine that caught them off guard.
I think they knew he was going to say no. I think it was a way to try to turn the negotiation around and try to pin Aiyuk in his corner in a corner. Because we knew you didn't want to go to New England, Brandon, but you said you wanted a trade, so we got you a trade, but you don't want to go here. You actually don't want to trade. Come crawling back to us for what we want to pay you.
But he didn't come crawling back. And then
that's maybe where there was a little bit of miscalculation.
Yeah.
But I think they were, who knows, I think they ultimately, though, were correct in at least calling Aiyuk's bluff when it comes to wanting to go to New England or to Cleveland, for example. Maybe Aiyuk does want to go to Pittsburgh, but I think they correctly called his bluff as it relates to New England. Maybe.
Yes. Well, no, for sure. And then, now the Pittsburgh thing percolated again this morning where Ian Rappaport says, well, now there's a trade.
Deal's in place.
It's up to Brandon Aiyuk to agree or not agree. And so maybe now is when they call his bluff, because Pittsburgh was always the preferred destination of those that were actually possible destinations. I'm sure he would have loved to go to Washington and play with his buddy, or maybe not. But Pittsburgh is a team where he was rumored to be connected to going all the way back to before the draft. Yeah. And so now you've got a deal in place with Pittsburgh. And now I think it's a case where they're calling his bluff, because here we got you to the destination that you wanted, and they're probably going to give you more money. What do you want to do, Brandon? And it seems like with every passing minute of this deal not getting done, he's probably thinking more long and hard about staying with the Niners at a reduced rate.
Yeah, maybe. 888-957-9570. Seems like a little bit of positive momentum for the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk. Mike Garafolo of NFL Network reporting that Brandon Aiyuk prefers to stay with the 49ers and has always preferred that, all things being equal. Also reporting that the Niners have put new offers or updated offers in front of Aiyuk, and they are much more to Aiyuk's liking. Not quite done just yet, but according to Mike Garafolo, a potential contract extension for Brandon Aiyuk with the 49ers is much closer now than it was, than it has been really at any point this offseason. So Niner fans, you feeling good about this? Should the 49ers just offer Aiyuk the last little thing that he wants and get this thing done? 888-957-9570. And was all the trouble worth it if ultimately it gets done in the middle of August? Let's go back out to the phone lines to Javier, who's standing by in Vacaville. Javier, what's up? You're on Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game. How you doing, Javier?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
What's up, my friend?
Sorry, I'm just on a bad road. Hello, Mr. Dibley, and I just want to say, hey, thank you for letting the Steeler fan know how incompetent you sound over there in Western Pennsylvania. This whole, this is the best you're going to get. What are you talking about? Others have him under contract. Like, this whole you can speak it into existence, that doesn't mean it's at all true in anything you're saying on the air or in your head, because the Antonio Brown, that ain't got no correlation to what we're dealing with Brandon Aiyuk. Those guys are not Brandon Aiyuk, and we're not the Steelers, and they're not the 49ers. I just hope, though, which, granted, we get mixed messages every other second on the internet, which is, quite frankly, just really unsettling, but I digress. My point is, I hope the 49ers learned their lesson the first time, trying to dice or roll some dice and take a gamble by trading a proven commodity and getting a pick to try to supplant his talent at the level of Brandon Aiyuk and DeForest Buckner when they replaced him with the pick that I called in, Javon Kinlaw, because that should tell him, like, hey, we probably shouldn't do this 2 times in a lifetime. First time, shame on me. Second time, shame on me. So there shouldn't be, we'll get a second and a fourth. For one, that's not enough. 2, there's no reason to even think about except that. Number 3, Brandon Aiyuk is the best receiver the 49ers have had in, I would say, 2 decades, but since 2014, they haven't had a wide receiver go back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons since Anquan Bolden until Aiyuk in the last 2 seasons. I mean, there's no reason for you to – and he's the best perimeter blocker in the league at the receiver position. There's no reason to let him go. You got to make this work, man. If it's $2 million, someone come up with the difference, because he's the best blocking player in the league, and it's not even an argument. Like, and if anybody has anything to say, let's discuss it, because he is – people say, blocking is not that important at the receiver position. In the 49ers offense, it's imperative. And everybody and their mother knows that. So, I just want to see what you guys think, and let the Steelers fans know, stop living in, fantasy land, because it's not at all reality, man. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks,
appreciate
Javier.
the call, Javier.
Appreciate the praise. I mean, that was an easy one to refute, because a second and a fourth is going to be a no from them, dog. It just it has to be a no. And all the reporting has been that the Niners want a player back from Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh doesn't want to offer a player. So when the Ian Rappaport report from this morning comes out and they have a deal in place, all I could think about is who's the player, because I really don't think the Niners would trade Brandon Aiyuk without a player coming back from Pittsburgh. And everybody has talked on the YouTube feed, brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union, about, 3-team trade and Devontae Adams. And that's all mostly fantasy land. And I mentioned on the chat that, 3-team trades never happen, and they came up with 2 times where they have happened. So, yeah, it's not a never happened, but it's very, very rare in the NFL where you get a 3-team trade. And I wonder if Devontae Adams would be a guy who would spring free at this late date in that kind of a blockbuster. We could all dream about that in fantasy land, but I think if a trade is in place with Pittsburgh, you'd have to be getting a player back from Pittsburgh. That seems to be the most logical thing that would happen. And our caller from Pittsburgh saying, no, there's no player involved in the deal.
Second and a fifth.
Then there's no deal. There's no deal for a second, and I think a fourth is what he said.
Yeah.
But
Something
second
like
and a fifth, whatever, Grandy. It's not happening now. Now, if you want to go back to April before the draft, and New England offered you their second.
That's a little different.
Yeah, and that was number 34.
Essentially was a late first,
right.
basically.
So now it's a little bit of a different calculus, because you can use that pick on a player who can help you.
Right now.
Yes.
You're not wait another year to do it.
Exactly. You're not drafting, you're not trading Aiyuk for 2 picks that you can't use right now.
Which is partly why I disagreed so much with Steiny, and he was talking about, you have this conversation about having to maybe cut bait with one of your stars is approaching the 49ers, and maybe you have to do it after this coming season, and you're kind of being gifted this scenario right now where you have the out. You have the out, and maybe you recoup a little bit of value, and that helps you in the future. But exactly what you're saying, Dibs, if the 49ers get rid of Brandon Aiyuk, and at the very least, don't get something back to help the team this season. Almost no matter what, no matter who you get back, you're going to be worse. At the very least, a little bit worse for this coming season, I would imagine. Say you even get back a starting caliber offensive lineman. Would you rather have a starting caliber offensive lineman or an all-pro wide receiver? I'm taking the all-pro wide receiver, even though this Niner team probably could use the offensive lineman. I think generally you're getting worse, even if you get someone back that could help you. But if you're only going to get back something that helps you in the future and not this coming season, that is the worst mistake that this front office could possibly make, because you're entering a season where it's not your last and final chance to win a Super Bowl, but it is by far your best remaining chance to win, because you're staring down the barrel of a shotgun where you're going to have to be paying your quarterback upwards of $50 million beyond this season.
Exactly. And, however many chances you have left or however big you think your window is, one thing I know for sure, and that is this year you are one of the favorites to go to the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl. So forget next year, because many wild things can happen in the NFL, injury and whatnot. But right now, this year, it's August. Your first game's in 27 days, and you are entering a season where you are expected to win the division. You are expected to be a threat to win the Super Bowl. So all those things together should motivate you as far as roster construction. And you don't want to get rid of, like you said, Mark, one of your all-pro players in exchange for a starting caliber interior lineman. That's great, but you don't want to lessen your roster in August going into a season.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with you 100%. All right, we got to take a quick break. If you missed it, a little bit of optimism on the Brandon Aiyuk 49er front. We'll let you know exactly what Mike Garafolo said coming up on the other side. Niner fans, you might have reason to believe the saga is coming to an end, and it might be a happy ending for 49er fans. We'll let you hear that coming up next. We're presented by Fremont Bank, celebrating 60 years of full-service banking with no compromises. More Willard and Dibs coming up next.
Love to hear you talk about Fremont Bank, Randy, because it's my bank. It's my family-owned bank, and it's got that family-owned feel.